visible to everyone. Um, so what's the rationale for NAC? As you all know, that number of devices that connects to the networks is growing exponentially. As in earlier, it was there were a few desktops in the offices, and people used to use a desktop for work. But now, with mobile devices, obviously the number has grown up, and now people are increasingly also talking about IoT and futuristic technologies like visualization and AR and so on, which are coming on inside our offices and in our workspaces. So what it means is that all devices will try to connect to the network. And as you all know, that Wi-Fi is kind of the default technology or de facto technology for wireless connectivity. As in, although people are talking about 5G, but many of you might have known that 5G is, yes, it's a great technology which might be primarily used outdoors. But when you come inside the premises, inside your offices, homes, whatever it may be, still people believe, or the industry experts believe, that Wi-Fi technology is here to stay. And now it's penetrating into a lot of other devices connected, like speakers and TVs and all kinds of even your home appliances now has Wi-Fi built in. So you can see that there will be a lot of growth in the number of devices that will use Wi-Fi, and obviously the networks will have to handle that. But with this explosion, also what is happening is networks are more and more vulnerable. So earlier it was easier for the IT administrators to control the networks because they all had to do is control the switch and maybe the end device. But now with people bringing their own devices in the offices, which is called BYOD, bring your own device, and using personal devices for office work and so on. And the differentiation between personal and office device has kind of blurred because people are now increasingly using their personal devices for connectivity in the office. So this has actually put a lot of strain on the enterprise networks and also to the IT administrators in the enterprise. So obviously the networks doesn't have to be just externally secured. Now there is increasingly need for securing the networks internally. That means from inside also you have to make your networks. For example, if an infected laptop gets into your network, it is potentially going to create a harm to entire network, and your whole network might get compromised. So the need to identify threats, enforce policies, and protection of the networks is becoming key to the modern enterprises, modern companies, right? As many of you know now, with the flexi offices, shared workspaces, and all kinds of models coming into place, and now even with work from home in the current scenario, you will see the heterogeneity of the networks, as in so many different devices, so many different permutations, combinations that the IT administrators will have to handle. So, and the other important thing for network management now is, right, in the past, the network management was always reactive. Now people are looking at ways of proactive network administration. So what it means is that making it proactive, your data is going to be important. What is happening in your networks, it needs to be visualized and needs to be understood. So many of you would be already aware that people deploy office networks. Even today in a lot of Indian offices, I've seen that there are unmanaged access points. People put in D-Link, TP-Link, or Netgear, and all these different types of access points, leave it to them to people to connect. There is a simple password which is the only protection layer that they have. So that means that is okay for a small company, but as you scale up or as your data becomes important or number of devices increase, you need to have better mechanisms of security as well as for traceability of the network. So let's look at some statistics now. As in, this is a data from a agency called Strategic Analytics. They have actually come up with these kind of numbers, and I'm sure many of you have seen similar charts where what is the number of devices and how they are going to exponentially increase by 2025. So you can see that PCs are going to take a very small number here, right? On the left hand side, we are talking about millions of devices, right? So basically, we are talking about, let's say, by 2025, we're talking more than 35 billion devices getting into our workspaces and in people's hands. And a lot of that will be enterprise IoT. We have smart home devices. Then we will have smartphones. You can see a chunk is majorly smartphones, tablets. So all these devices will play a major role in connectivity, right? In the future. The major chunk primarily is talking about enterprise IoT. And so I guess it's important for IT administrators now to prepare for these kind of network explosion. So let's see how we can do that. So these are actually, I've discussed some of these, but let's go through and understand what are the challenges that the network or enterprise face today. So on the left hand side, we have bring your own device. So employees want to use their own device. Now, I was just discussing with one of my sales guys in the morning today that in the current scenario, a lot of IT companies, or in fact, a lot of companies have actually shipped their PCs to the respective employees' house for them to work from home, right? And you can imagine what the logistics nightmare that would have been, trying to get the PCs out of the campus. A lot of them are actually SEZs, or there are a lot of regulations around the units outside and so on. The client restrictions are there. So it's a logistical nightmare, and people now are looking to see uh, how to make it more nimble for their employees to work. So BYOD is basically a de facto thing in almost all enterprises today, that you can use your smartphones for working, and we all do, as in almost all employees use a smartphone for checking mail, or even answering Skype messages and so on, which are related to their workspace. But with BYOD comes with infected endpoints. So people are doing a lot of things with their personal devices, and there is very little control on these endpoints. So they come with infected, with malware, with viruses, and so network security becomes the key. On the right hand side, how do you onboard employees when a new employee comes, employee leaves? How do you enforce security rules? What kind of methods you would have in place so that your employees can connect seamlessly to the network when they arrive in the office, or to go to their satellite offices, that means branch offices, or even in today's scenario, work from home, right? How do you guarantee that the employee is securely connected to your corporate network? And then there's always this guest access component, where your people who are not part of your enterprise, they come in and try to access your networks. So how do you enable guest access? And then when you have these kind of scenarios, how do you enforce consistent network policies across your network? So uh, so these are some challenges in terms of onboarding or getting the employees as well as guests connected reliably on your network. And then there are multiple login schemes. Like some companies want to enforce an OTP based mechanism. Some of them to have LDAP authentication. There are a lot of multiple ways in which employees would like to get online, or even guests would like to get online. So you need to have mechanisms to enforce multiple login schemes. Then obviously all of this needs to be done to increase the employees' productivity and reduce network downtime, because all of them actually directly impacts your bottom line, right, of your organization. So as an IT admin, this is another challenge. How do I reduce the network downtime? And in today's modern enterprises, I think network downtime, even having and half an hour of network downtime means, for bigger companies, even it's like millions of dollars of loss, right? So you need to make sure that your network is up to date and it's working and so on. And on the left hand side, how do you deal with network complexity, with the help desk getting overloaded, management cost of running the network. So these in a nutshell are kind of the challenges that an IT administrator in an enterprise face today. So let's let's see what posture, security posture means what the IT administrator would like to do on this in this circumstances. So first and foremost, the IT admin needs to have a secure and trusted enterprise network, hands down, as in that's something that he can't compromise at all. Then there needs to be a scalable and consistent security fabric of your on your network. So that means you can't have security in hodgepodge, as in a hodgepodge, like what we're talking about. Like in some cases you have username, password. In some cases you have the age-old WPA2 key. In some cases you have LDAP authentication, and the guests are getting in online through something. And so there is no consistency within your how you are enforcing security on your network. And then, especially if you have remote offices, how do you enforce policies centrally from to those remote offices? That becomes a key as well. And the most another important aspect of security, that it needs to be as transparent to your users as possible, because you can obviously enforce a lot of security, means you can have multiple levels of authentication, but if you have that, your customers or your end users or your employees will not like to go through that. As in, imagine trying to do first a WPA2 password, then going through the authentication, then through going through verification, and then having multiple schemes to connect to the networks. It is going to create a lot of problems to your end users, right? So your security needs to be as transparent as possible. And obviously it needs to be always high availability of your security. And then it's not just not data. You need to have security across data, voice, and mobility. Mobility means moving from one place to another or one location to another. So all of these are important for your network. So having the right security posture for your network is getting importance. Now let's look at what NAC is supposed to do, as in what are, at a high level, what are the NAC functions. So first and foremost, the onboarding of your users and authenticating of your users seamlessly is one of the most important function of NAC. And the de facto method of doing that worldwide is called 802.1x authentication, especially for enterprise networks and increasingly even for switches also. A lot of managed switches also enforce .1x authentication. So the way it works, I will show you actually, but basically .1x means that the users can connect, get authenticated before even joining the network. That's one of the biggest things here, because in a classic Wi-Fi model, Wi-Fi means Wi-Fi hotspot model, you actually connect to the network first, and then you get authenticated through a captive portal or a login page. But there, you actually first have to connect to the network. You get an IP address from the network, and that's when basically you become kind of a part of the network before you authenticate yourself, which is not something that enterprise like, because in order to enforce security, they want any end user, like it could be a guest or it could be someone who is not authorized to get on the network, to also not be allowed to even connect to the Wi-Fi within that premises. That's the first and foremost. So that is done through mechanism 1x authentication. So I will in the next slide, I will explain it to you how it works. Then we also have guest access, which we all know that guests will come and go. So you need to have a guest access and a control guest access, so that your guest will be able to access the network without even compromising any of your other any of your internal network, basically. So that's guest access, and the path for guest access should be completely isolated from your employee Wi-Fi or from your internal Wi-Fi or internal network. Then you need to have a mechanism of scanning and profiling endpoints. What kind of endpoints are connected? What is the level of security that they have? And then you need to have policy enforcement. Like it could be about what kind of websites people are browsing, which particular network segment users can access, um, at what time of the day they can access. Let's say your organization is open from 9 to 6, then the employees should be able to get during those times. Certain employees, a certain group of employees will not be allowed to use the network after those times, and so on. So you should be able to group the employees into different categories and apply enforce policies on your network. Then you need to do device fingerprinting. That means what is the device type, whether what kind of devices these are. Are they what are they kind of certain class of devices which might compromise the network. So there are also endpoint checks and audits that you need to run. And lastly, about insights. Insights means understanding or getting network intelligence in real time. So what is happening on the network? What is the client doing? Real time, what is the traffic being used? All of these goes into the network intelligence. It can go deeper and deeper into that, as in it can go even to a level of what kind of applications users are using, any restricted applications on the network, and are there any one of them trying to hack into the networks, as in any of those devices are kind of doing too much of multicasting or too much of broadcasting into the network, which is compromising the performance of the network, and so on. So, and then obviously tracking user session activity. Employees, you need to track their activity, what how much time they were online, and so on. So these are in a nutshell what a NAC is supposed to do. Sorry about it. So this at a high level is the NAC architecture. So let me just quickly explain you this diagram. On the right hand side, you'll see different types of endpoints, smartphones, laptops, and some of the red ones are basically unmanaged endpoints. So that means they are not yet managed, or they are not registered, right? And there are these end devices can connect into your network through two mechanisms. One is through the wired port, and second is through the wireless port. Let me just, someone has unmuted his hand. Let me, someone had, okay. So there is a Wi-Fi access point through which people can connect, and the laptops obviously can connect through a switch. They can plug it into a wired network. So both a managed switch as well as a Wi-Fi access point actually has a concept of .1x authentication, or it's called WPA2 enterprise. And the way it works is that even before these endpoints get associated to Wi-Fi, they will get authenticated through a NAC device. And the NAC device is usually, in most cases, it is connected either through an Active Directory or to an LDAP server installed inside the premises. So that is where the direct database of your users lie, in the Active Directory or LDAP. So the NAC needs to interface with your Active Directory or LDAP servers to authenticate your users. Now, these endpoints will get authenticated during association. So as I told you earlier, that association is the first phase. Like when you are connecting to the SSID, or when you plug in the cable into a switch, that is called the association basically. So before you need to successfully associate yourself, and only after you associate yourself, you'll get an IP address to your machine. And once you get an IP address, then you become a part of that network, right? So we control the association part of the user. In a classic hotspot, the association is allowed because the SSID is open. But you get authenticated during the authentication phase, where you go through the captive portal. So for guest Wi-Fi, perhaps you will always have a portal. So at that time, on a particular SSID, which is going to have its own separate path, which is not going to interfere with your enterprise network, the users will be able to connect to open SSID, which is your guest users. But your enterprise users will always get connected through a WPA2 enterprise level security through of their endpoints, and will get authenticated internally. Now, the .1x authentication can be done in multiple ways. One of them is called using certificates, or you can have a Active Directory username password, and there are other keys also, right? The ways of validating users. But generally, these are the two kind of main methods of doing that. Um, so when the user gets associated, that's when the user is successfully also authenticated on the network. At that time, the NAC will push certain rules to the end devices, which are basically access points and switches. And that those rules will define how these endpoints will connect to the network, to which particular WAN segment they can connect to which particular internal VLANs or internal networks they can connect to. So for example, you are, let's take an example of a classic enterprise where you have an engineering department, a finance department, management, this thing. So a enterprise will create different VLANs for each of those, right? Your engineering VLAN is separate, finance is different, operations is different, and so on, right? Now it is obvious, it's a no-brainer that an engineering person doesn't need access to any of the financial data servers, right? The finance servers or financial data. So you need to isolate all of these devices inside your network to prevent them from being hacked, attacked, or accessed without permission. So the way you do that is that when you get authenticated, you are actually, as an employee, you get added into an Active Directory or into a particular group. And let's say I join in as a new employee into that organization in the engineering team. So I become a part of the engineering group. So when any of my personal device, if you choose to bring in, it could be my mobile phone, it could be my laptop, it could be my tablet or any other device, it chooses to get onto the corporate network, it needs to do a .1x authentication and will get the policies which are defined for the engineering department or engineering group, and they will be enforced when I connect to the network. Now tomorrow I decide to move, let's say, into finance, then all that needs to be done is that the Active Directory, your group, needs to change. And I'll connect through the finance VLAN or finance group, and then I'll be able to access the finance VLAN and all the respective servers are all the network, right? So all of this is controlled by the NAC controller. And then you also need to there is something new concept called SD-WAN. Many of you would be aware of it. So NAC is also trying to do some SD-WAN functions, because which traffic can be routed through which WAN function can be decided at the runtime based on the user's profile. And that sort of thing can be done through that. And obviously all the traffic goes through your internet firewall, which is connected into enterprise, right? So this is in a nutshell how the NAC architecture looks like in a typical enterprise. I'll also explain the onboarding process. I think I've highlighted it in my previous slide, but nonetheless, the step one is any of these users, they connect to the corporate network, either to the guest Wi-Fi or to the enterprise employee Wi-Fi. Then one of our APs will challenge them. AP or switch will challenge them for .1x authentication. Or there are also .1x is one mechanism. You also can have a MAC-based authentication. That means the UniNAC controller can also do MAC authentication. That means certain MAC addresses will be allowed to get onto the network, or you'll put them into the whitelist. And then there is a guest Wi-Fi also, which is kind of open. So there are multiple ways where the guest Wi-Fi usually happens through a captive portal, right? So there are multiple ways in which your users can connect. Once your users are connect, so they get redirected to NAC controller for verification, and for they get challenged by the NAC controller. The NAC controller performs authentication of the devices against LDAP, Active Directory, or the local database. And based on your profile, NAC validates the device, and the device is allowed on the corporate network. If validation is failed, then user can also be redirected to another VLAN where the user is challenged to do certain things. So in a classic NAC environment, it is also possible that you can deny the user access to the network based on what kind of device it is, and we can prompt the user that, okay, you are not allowed to use this compromised device on the network. You can even redirect the user to a page that explains him what to do. So I think these are different types of NAC users. There are wired endpoints, you have guest devices, you have wireless endpoints, that means your wireless devices. NAC can also work with VPN endpoints. So for this is a classic example of work from home. That means your NAC can be used to even enforce these policies to the VPN endpoints. And there are certain devices which doesn't support .1x authentication. For them also you can enforce them. So I think I've discussed this. So these are some of the key things. Dynamic VLAN assignment is one of the key features of NAC. Then access policies, and compliance checks, and network intelligence. So let's understand what are the benefits of NAC. As in, one is that it enforces security. It prevents rogue and malicious endpoints from accessing the network. It controls guest access policies. It protects all your registered devices. And as an IT admin, you get full network visibility inside your network. What is going on for each of your devices, each of your end users, what all devices each of your end users are using, and so on. And you also gain a lot of powerful insights into what is going on inside your network. Um, so that brings to the end of my presentation. What I'll do is I'll open up, I think, for a question and answers. So feel free to kind of raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask me any question. After that, I'll give you a quick glimpse of our Unibox controller, which we are now changing, or we are making a new version of it that will support some of these NAC functions. So our goal here is to build a very powerful NAC device, and there are only a handful of companies out there which actually have a full-fledged NAC solution. And we are trying to be one of the first companies in India to kind of build this solution. So please feel free to ask any questions if you have any before I go to the actual demonstration of our Unibox controller with NAC functions. Yes, Sagar. Hello. Yeah. Anyone has any questions? Please unmute yourself. No questions so far? Okay, so let's go to the presentation of our controller. So just wanted to know, many of you have actually looked at our Unibox controller, if I'm correct, right? For those who don't know about our Unibox controller, Unibox controller was designed as a network controller and a hotspot controller, and it has a lot of functionality and a lot of features that we have included for making your Wi-Fi networks secure and managed. So Unibox basically is used or deployed in a lot of places, and many of you have already deployed it. We have deployed Unibox in schools. It has been deployed in a lot of almost all the hotels or that needs guest management is a potential target for Unibox. Then we have deployed it in hospitals. We have deployed it in railway stations and metro stations for managing Wi-Fi there. In corporate offices, in co-working spaces. I think that we have a big list of customers who have deployed Unibox for managing their wireless network. So whichever place you need to have a managed network, Unibox is ideal solution there. The other beauty of our product is that we don't tie you with particular brand. As in, if you buy a Cisco WLC or Cisco wireless LAN controller, they will only work with the Cisco access points. Or same thing with Ruckus, or same thing with almost any vendor out there, that they expect you to buy their access point when you're deploying their solution, right? But Unibox works differently. Obviously, we have our own range of access points which we recommend you to buy, But Unibox provides not just wireless management function, it also provides a lot of user access management and many other functions that are required to run your networks or public networks. So we work with almost all the range of access points, as in be it Cisco, you have an existing Cisco network, Ubiquiti network, you have a MikroTik network. Everything is all in all of those scenarios. Unibox can be deployed. So it's kind of hardware independent in a sense. Um, Now, what we have done here in Unibox, I won't be able to go through the whole demo of our Unibox controller. If any one of you is interested, we would be happy to take another webinar for that, for demonstrating Unibox. But I'll quickly go through some of the key features that are designed for the enterprise in Unibox. So one of the key features in an enterprise is something called, we call as multi-WAN. So a classic enterprise will always can't rely only on one internet connection today. They'll always have a backup connection, right? You like a failover or a backup connection. So in case of that, you need to have a special router that will handle both these connections at the same time and do automatic failover. In case one of them fails, the primary fails, the traffic should automatically switch over to the secondary without manual intervention, right? So Unibox comes with a multi-WAN function, as in, so here you can have multiple WAN circuits added inside Unibox, and the circuit can be anything. It could be fiber, it could be broadband, it could be 4G, it could be satellite. You can have any kind of circuit and you can connect it into Unibox. So, and other important thing is that it does even aggregation of those two circuits. So it means that one of your circuits remain idle for long on this thing. If you have two circuit, one is a backup, the backup circuit will also get consumed based on the rules that you specify, or the what we call as the traffic share you want to have on that network. So we do an what is called the WAN bonding inside Unibox. So that's one of the key features that is an enterprise would need. The other important thing that the enterprise needs, as I told you earlier, was called .1x authentication. So in case of .1x authentication, it is generally done by enabling first I think for .1x authentication, you can have a certificate based authentication or username password based authentication. So the way it works is that our Unibox or a UniNAS controller has a built-in AAA server which supports .1x authentication. So when your endpoint, and it doesn't need to be our devices also, it could be even a Cisco AP or Cisco switch, you enable authentication, you can redirect them to Unibox for authentication. You always need a AAA server for enforcing .1x authentication. So in case of certificate-based authentication, you install the certificate on the server, and then you have to also install the certificate on the client. And then the client and the server exchange these certificates, and then they validate them. The client gets validated using the certificate, right? The next thing that you need to do is create what is called as a NAS profile. A NAS profile is basically a profile that you set here. So here you see the device type is our AP. It could be also third-party APs. If you select others, it could be another vendor AP. And then you have to specify the radius server IP addresses here. And
Excuse me, are you showing something? Because your screen is fixed on the benefits. There is nothing else we can see.
Oh, I'm extremely sorry. I'm really, really sorry.
There is nothing that we've been able to see. At least I have not been able to see.
No,
I
no, no,
don't know
no,
about
no.
the
Great,
others.
great. Sorry about that. Now you should be able to see it.
Yes, thank you.
Oh my God, I'm really sorry. I was not aware. I thought I had shared the screen. No, no, no. Thanks for telling that.
Thank you.
So yeah, so I was showing you the screen about the NAS profile. So under under enterprise, under NAS. So I'm sure this is the interface of our Unibox. So let me go back and show you our WAN profile, the multi-WAN profile that I was telling you about. So this is where you can define multiple WAN circuits here, and you can aggregate them as well. And I was going through the enterprise section, and showing you about certificates. The certificate is a mechanism of doing .1x authentication. Similarly, you can also have a NAS configuration here. So your NAS configuration is there are some technical details. I won't get into those, but idea here is that you can do some settings here, and these settings will be pushed to our access point, and the access point will get these settings and will use those settings to talk to the Radius server. And that's how the .1x authentication is set. In addition to that, you have to go to wire access points. So remember, our Unibox or a UniNAS controller is also an access point controller, as in we can manage our branded access points through this controller. So Unibox basically is kind of a Swiss knife for an IT admin. It provides everything, as in all you can think of is added into one box. It has a wireless controller. It has a AAA server. It has a captive portal system. It has a .1x authentication system. It has a user database. It has a URL filtering option. Then it has a VPN server and many other functions, right? As in, I can go to those. It has an advertisement system, and everything is integrated into one box. So when you configure one of these settings here under an AP, um, you can see that the kind of security type is called WPA2 enterprise. This is where you select your enterprise, okay, and then you select a NAS profile, okay, and the NAS profile is we call it Nitin AP. We just gave it a name. That is a NAS profile that you need to set up, right? And once this is set up, your AP will get the configuration to talk to the Radius server for authenticating the users when they connect to that AP. And then there is also a concept of MAC policy. Okay, MAC policy means you can define what all MAC addresses are allowed to get onto the network without authentication, right? And that is called the MAC policy. These are whitelisting of MAC addresses. So that is also pushed from the controller to the APs during for authentication. Okay, and then you can select where your traffic needs to go when the user logs in through the WPA2, whether it need to go through VPN server or it needs to go through a WAN circuit. So VPN means this is a classic example for work from home, where WPA2 enterprise can be set up. So today we can actually have our UniNAS controller in your central office, and AP can be deployed at the employee's house. And when we can have an SSID which is created for that employee, and the employee can, when he connects to that SSID, he does a .1x authentication, and that .1x authentication will be done through the central server, and then it will create a VPN tunnel from the AP to the NAS, so that all his traffic will get into your network securely from his home. So we are actually trying to pitch it to companies who want to do a set of work from home policies using this technology, right? Using the VPN as well as the .1x authentication method. So if you send it through the VPN, basically it will send it through the VPN profile that you create in our system. You can also create a VPN profile. So here is a VPN client or a VPN server you can set up. So you can create a VPN profile here, and then you can your network, you can broadcast the traffic through the VPN server. Okay. So once this is set up, these settings, the way our controller works is that obviously all these settings that you do, they get pushed to all the access points inside your corporate network. So these things will appear on the AP, and then the AP will start enforcing .1x authentication. Now, in addition to this, another important thing that you need to do is routing, because once you're authenticated, how do you enforce routing for the user? So that is done through something called group-based routing. So group-based routing can decide once this particular group of users. So for example, I have my employees group, or let's say we have this group, different groups here, right? I have a group called CLAN2. And what is the destination LAN circuit the user can connect to? So it means that when the user authenticates to a particular network, so if that user belongs to a particular group, they can only access this particular LAN segment, not any other LAN segment in the network. Okay, so this is how you control which part of the network users can connect to. And you also can control what is called as the WAN routing. So this is done through, so basically user authenticates, let's say a home user or a corporate user connects to through the VPN. The VPN traffic can be forwarded out to a particular outbound, like particular internet port. So you have multiple internet circuits in your office, so you can actually use them for different one of them can be used for certain group of users, other one can be used for other group of users. So that kind of dynamic routing is possible. Okay. Now, in addition to this, obviously, all your enterprise users, they need to interface to an LDAP server. So here you have multiple mechanisms of logging, integrating our NAS device. We can integrate it with a social media. We can integrate with an LDAP server. We can also do an integration with G Suite. So some companies also use G Suite today, like Google database for authentication. So classic one is LDAP or Active Directory system. So you can configure your LDAP settings here. So again, there is some configuration to be done. So you can select what kind of LDAP servers you have. You have an Active Directory from Microsoft installed. So you can create an authentication, and then there's some technical data that obviously you will have to fill up, and then you can choose what this LDAP config should be used. Should it be used for your hotspot, or should it be used for your enterprise Wi-Fi? So your enterprise Wi-Fi users will use this particular LDAP profile to authenticate, right? So this is how you set up your LDAP configuration as well as your .1x authentication. And then you define the routing rules based on uh, where the user needs to connect to. And also the Active Directory has the concept of groups. So you can create different groups within Active Directory or LDAP. And based on the groups defined in LDAP, we will create corresponding groups into NAS. So under authentication, you'll see groups. And these groups will mimic the groups that you have inside your LDAP in the LDAP system, and the users will automatically get assigned to that respective group. Now, once your users are created, you should be able to monitor what these users are doing on the network. So here is all the data about each and every user on the network. So I can click here, I can find out when a user is, whether he's offline, what kind of devices the user is using, how long the user is on the network. All the information about the user is, you can change the password, you can look at what all devices the user has registered. Sorry, let me look at some other user who might have little more data. So so this is a user. So you can see that, okay, so this user is using a Xiaomi communication device. This is the bandwidth the user has consumed. Obviously our office is closed, so there is no data usage and so on, but you get to see all the devices which are registered, the authentication history of the user, when the user logged in, from which device the user has logged in, and all the data, authentication history of the user, when did the user connect on the network, and so on. So there's a lot of traceability into the network. And then we have the captive portals. So when you're having guest authentication, you want to set up a captive portal for your guests. So it's very, very easy to set up a captive portal within our Unibox. So all you need to do is you select, you get to give it a name to your captive portal. And then there are like 22 different types of templates that you can create. It could be voucher, it could be approval based portals. In a lot of enterprises, they have this approval based portal That means a certain user will approve the user or a guest login request before the user guest can get online. Let's say it's an IT admin or someone. So all of these can be set up. You can upload your own logo. You can even put advertisements on the captive portal, like pre-login advertisements and so on. You customize it with your background image, your logo, and so on. All these things, your terms and conditions, with the name of your location. So this is welcome to this so and so office. And so this is a captive portal which is generally used for guest authentication. And then we have a URL filtering. So you have a URL filtering capability inside the box itself. So I can create a filter and apply it to a particular group of users. So let's say so management would have access to all the things. Maybe you want to block social media on your net, on your inside your offices. So your, let's say, social networking or adult sites and so on can be easily blocked here. Okay, using just a click of a mouse, you can, and you can block all these groups for a certain all these categories of websites for the particular group of users. So, and you can create multiple such rules within the network, and then you can control what group of users can access to the network at what during what day. So you are working from Monday to Friday. Only this group of users, let's say students, can access the network only during from Monday to Friday. And they can also, you can also specify what time they can access. Let's say 9 to 9 to 5, 9 to 6, for example, right? So this is how you can define a particular group of users, which all, what time of the day they can access. So all these policies can be set up inside the controller. And then you have a lot of reporting here. You can have diagnostic tools, and you can look at a lot of reports here, like the usage statistics, your ISP bandwidth, whether you are getting the right amount of bandwidth from your ISP. So it actually tells you graphical representation of whether your ISP, this is the ISP bandwidth. So we don't have very good, I think there has been outages in our, when we are not in the office. So I can look at number of users who are connecting for a period of time and so on. So all the statistics are there here inside the box itself. I think that's more or less. I think Unibox has many other features. We don't have time to go through it. Yeah, one more important last question, last function is this VPN server. So Unibox comes with a built-in VPN server, which is also needed for your enterprise. So you can set up a VPN server, and your endpoints or end devices can tunnel from their respective homes or respective branch offices inside your main office to connect securely to your main branch, right? So that's how you can set up VPN also inside the. So that brings to the end of the presentation. I think we are almost 1 hour into it. I would like to open up again for question and answers, Q&A. If anyone has any questions, please unmute yourself and feel free to ask us any questions. I think we would be happy to take those questions. Uh, or you can also type it in the chat box. In the chat box, I think there are already some questions raised. So let me see if I can take some of those. So some of them have already been answered by our team. Santosh has answered. I think we can get a recording. We can make the recording available to you as well. So okay, great. So any questions so far from the asset members? I hope you were this was informative to you.
I thank you for the presentation. Nice, informative, very clean, smooth. Uh, do you have any competitive products in that same range that you compete with?
Yes. So primarily there are only 5-6 companies which provide information in the world today. A couple of them are, one is Cisco has a solution. Aruba or HP has one solution. Then there is a company called Forescout which also offers it. Juniper has one solution. I think these are like few companies on the top of my head which have, and there are a few other small startup companies which are also offering some of these. But there are hardly like 6-7 companies which are offering a full-fledged NAC solution.
Okay. Thanks. And also, are you connecting right now to your server
Uh,
and giving this presentation? I can see on the browser saying not secure. Now, why would it say not secure when you're talking so much about this
oh,
solution and security?
no. So generally it gets access over a domain name. I'm accessing it over an IP address. So it requires, so this actually to be managed inside our network. Since I'm outside, the only way I can connect to it using an IP address. I can't go into the domain of the internal office network. So that's why. But when you are accessing it internally, you will obviously access it through a URL. It's a domain name, and which is a secure. There's a certificate installed inside Unibox. So
Okay.
yes, your question is very valid. That why am I accessing it? But right now, this is actually
Uh, yeah,
VPN's.
it doesn't matter actually where or how, but considering the product and the solution that we are talking about,
Mhm.
I thought it could be something that you should be aware about. And I think if there is a way of in the presentations, whenever in future show something which is more secure or not show the not secure, then probably
Okay.
it just